The frost always arrives with a sudden, silent violence. You can smell it on the wind hours before the temperature drops, a sharp metallic tang that sends you rushing into the garden with every basket you own. Pulling the last of the potatoes from the freezing mud, your hands ache, but the heavy weight of those garden harvests is the purest kind of security. This is the exact moment the growing season ends, and the real test of survival begins. The challenge of storing this bounty without plugging a freezer into a wall requires stepping back into an older rhythm. The obstacle is entirely environmental, demanding a delicate balance of temperature regulation and moisture control to halt the natural process of decay. You are essentially trying to pause time for 1,200 pounds of living plant matter. To do that, you have to look downward past the frost line where the earth maintains a steady, unwavering chill. To rely solely on the ground beneath your feet changes how you view your property. You have stopped seeing the homestead as just a surface to build on and start recognizing it as a deep living partner in your independence. True seasonal food preservation is not about fighting nature with electricity and plastic. It is about understanding the mechanics of the earth well enough to borrow its stillness for the winter. Building traditional root cellars is a brutal, humbling labor. Digging into a hillside with nothing but a shovel and a pickaxe, you hit bedrock, thick clay, and tangled roots that fight you for every inch of progress. Your shoulders burn, and the sheer volume of soil you have to move feels endless. But every grueling strike of the steel into the dirt carves out a sanctuary that will eventually outlast you. Once the cavern is hollowed out, the physics of the space take over. The thick earthen walls provide massive thermal mass, absorbing the cold of autumn and holding it tight even when blizzards rage above ground. Below the frost line, the ambient temperature hovers naturally around 39.5 degrees Fahrenheit. It is the perfect electricity-free climate for long-term root crop storage, provided you can manage the air quality. Stepping into that finished subterranean room for the first time is a revelation. The air is heavy, still, and smells faintly of crushed stone and damp roots. The chaotic noise of the wind outside completely vanishes, replaced by a profound, echoing quiet. It feels less like a storage room and more like a vault, a quiet chapel dedicated to the hard work of the summer. But cold air alone will not save your harvest from turning to dust. The secret to keeping carrots crisp and beets firm lies in mastering relative humidity. A dirt floor allows the natural moisture of the ground to constantly evaporate into the space, keeping the air thick and damp. If the air gets too dry, the vegetables will shrivel and die, losing the vital water weight that keeps them edible. The danger, however, is that moisture is also the mother of rot. Before anything crosses the threshold of the cellar, every potato and winter squash must be properly cured in a warm, dry place. This curing period toughens their skins, healing over any nicks or scratches sustained during the harvest. One bruised, uncured potato weeping in a dark bin can spread a catastrophic mold that will wipe out your entire winter food supply in days. When the curing is finally done, the loading begins. You carry heavy burlap sacks down the earthen steps, carefully arranging the golden onions in mesh hammocks and burying the carrots in deep wooden crates filled with damp sand. The rough skin of a winter squash feels like dry leather under your thumbs as you line them up on the wooden shelves. The cellar slowly fills with the rich, earthy perfume of dormant life. Above ground, the garden is now a desolate stretch of frozen, blackened stalks. The vibrant, chaotic ecosystem of the summer has completely shut down, sleeping beneath a thick blanket of snow. But down in the dark, the energy of that garden has simply been relocated. The cellar becomes the new beating heart of the homestead, holding the captured sunlight of July in the form of starches and sugars. There is a deep, primal satisfaction in this shift of power. You are no longer dependent on the fragile supply chains of the modern world or the hum of an inverter to keep your family fed. You have successfully bypassed the grid, relying instead on the ancient, reliable technology of dirt and stone. It is a quiet rebellion against a culture of disposable convenience. The work does not stop once the shelves are full, as the cellar demands a daily rhythm of attention. Every morning you walk down the cold steps with a lantern, breathing in the air to test for the sharp, sour tang of spoilage. You run your hands over the cabbages, feeling for soft spots, culling anything that threatens the health of the whole. It is a quiet, meditative chore that keeps you intimately connected to your food. The invisible flow of air is your greatest ally in this daily maintenance. Simple exhaust pipes extending up through the roof draw the warm, stale air out, while a lower intake pipe pulls the crisp winter breeze in. This passive ventilation acts like the lungs of the room, flushing out the ethylene gas emitted by the resting produce. Managing those vents becomes a delicate dance with the changing weather outside. When a brutal January cold snap drives the outside temperature down to 15 degrees below zero, the stakes suddenly skyrocket. The intake vents must be stuffed with burlap to prevent the freezing air from pouring directly onto your delicate stores. You lie awake at night listening to the wind howl, mentally calculating the thermal mass of your walls. If the frost penetrates the earth and reaches the bins, months of backbreaking labor will turn to mush. But the morning brings relief when you unlatch the heavy insulated door and feel the gentle, familiar wave of cool air wash over your face. The earth held its ground against the storm. Pulling a perfectly firm, bright orange carrot from the damp sand, you wipe away the grit and take a bite. The loud, crisp snap echoing in the small room is the sound of absolute victory. That single crunch represents a massive shift in personal sovereignty. You are holding a piece of summer in the dead of winter, preserved entirely by your own hands and the natural properties of the land. The grocery store miles away could board its doors, the power lines could snap under the ice, and your daily life would not change. You have built a fortress against scarcity. Bringing a basket of those cold, dirt-caked roots back up to the warm kitchen is a daily ritual of gratitude. Dropping the heavy potatoes onto the cutting board, the smell of the damp cellar briefly fills the warm room. As they roast in the cast iron pan, the sugars that were concentrated by the cold caramelize into a deep, rich sweetness. It is a meal that tastes exactly like resilience. Back down in the dark, the environment continues its silent, steady work. The moisture lingering in the dirt floor ensures the remaining apples stay plump and taut, refusing to yield to the dry winter air. The heavy door seals tight, locking in the perfect microclimate. The system requires no moving parts, no maintenance contracts, and no software updates to function flawlessly. As February bleeds into March, the dynamic inside the vault begins to shift. The bins are getting lower, the wooden slats of the shelves showing through where mountains of squash used to sit. Small pale sprouts begin to push their way out of the potato eyes, sensing the subtle lengthening of the days above ground. The stored harvest knows that its time is coming to an end, and spring is rushing toward the homestead. Watching those supplies dwindle brings a strange mix of anxiety and profound respect. You realize that you are living exactly as your ancestors did, measuring the passage of the year by the depth of the sand in the carrot bin. It forces you to eat in harmony with the seasons, appreciating the last wrinkled apple as a luxury rather than an expectation. The artificial, endless summer of the supermarket aisle loses all its appeal. By the time the first real thaw turns the driveway to mud, you are sweeping out the empty corners of the subterranean room. You gather the last few shriveled beets and the remaining onions, their papery skins scattering across the packed earth floor. The space feels cavernous and hollow now, stripped of its vibrant colors and earthy smells. The heavy wooden door is finally propped open, allowing the warm spring breeze to scour the damp walls. Outside, the garden soil is waking up, teeming with the microscopic life that will soon feed a new generation of seedlings. The compost pile, fed by the culled scraps from the winter stores, is rich and black, ready to be turned into the beds. The cycle of the homestead is a closed loop, where the end of one season's harvest directly fuels the birth of the next. The empty cellar is not a failure, but a promise fulfilled. Mastering this traditional art offers a peace of mind that money simply cannot buy. It transforms the daunting task of winter survival into a quiet, rhythmic partnership with the earth. When you learn to trust the soil to protect what it has grown, you step out of the frantic pace of modern consumption. You realize that true wealth is not found in a bank account, but in a dark, quiet room beneath the frost line, waiting patiently for the snow to fall.